Having a good time. So we want to welcome you here today to Bethel St. Andrews United. We have, of course, this is an ecumenical service with our Anglican brothers and sisters and our Presbyterian brothers and sisters. That's right. So we have with us here Hilary Murray, Reverend Hilary Murray, and Reverend Heather Kincaid. So we are looking forward to having a very special time today as we look at a very important issue. And we're going to be talking a lot about that later on. So I'm pretty thrilled that all of this is coming together. I want to, before we begin, we're not going to have any announcements today, but I would like to welcome a few people who are here visiting with us today. Of course, Reverend Hilary Murray here and Reverend Heather Kincaid sitting here in the front, but also Reverend David Sherman, who is here, who is the Ottawa Presbytery minister, and he will be sharing with us a little later on. And we have also Bob Richards, who is with us here from EDGE. And if you don't know what EDGE is, then talk to Bob. He'll tell you all about it. It's a very important thing in the United Church of Canada. And also we have Dr. Charles and Linda Barrett, who are with us. And Charles is the chair for, and raise your hand, Charles, so they know who you are. Okay, and so he's the chair for Church and Society for the Ottawa Presbytery, and so I'm part of that, and along with a number of others. So he's here sharing with us today. And of course, Jack McLaren, our MPP, is here. And we have all our dignitaries all together. Self-selection, I love it. It's great. And also Eli Elsh Ontario will be here a little later. He's double booked today. He's a busy man, but he'll be joining with us a little later. So we have a very short liturgy today because ushers, get them. Okay, who said that? No. No, and I agree, and that's why I did it, because we want to give maximum time to our speakers, and I'll be introducing both Suzanne Lee and Julie McKercher. I'll be introducing them prior to their speaking, and I'll try not to steal all your thunder, Julie and Suzanne. But anyway, I will be introducing them. But we have, I'm going to invite both Hilary and Heather to come with me, and we're going just to do our call to worship, as you will find it here. Would you stand, please? By wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. Unless the Lord guards the city, the watchman keeps awake in vain.
Woe to him who builds his house without righteousness, and his upper rooms without justice.
Let us be wise in building a house on the rock.
Come to us today, O God, as we consider the plight of those around us.
For the mother who must decide which bill to pay, the electricity or the heat. For the senior who moves from their beloved home because they can no longer afford the upkeep. For the father who doesn't want to go anywhere near a food bank, but must stand in line there to feed his family.
For a single person who has just been evicted and is in a shelter.
For the child who listens quietly and sadly as their friends describes all the things they own.
Move us this day to be your people for this time and for this place.
Let us be for others a shelter in a time of storm, a way station on an arduous journey. Thanks be to God. Amen. Our opening hymn is a familiar one to many of us here. If it's not to you, it's very easy. And Toby is...
We are
while you're standing, I would simply ask you if you would share the peace one with another. The peace of Christ be with you.
And also with you.
Let's share one with another. Peace of Christ be with you. Great. Okay, well, if I could just have your attention, please. If you kind of make your way back, kind of like herding cats here, Dwight. So here we go. Now we're going to receive the morning offering at this time. But before we do that, I just want to make one short announcement. And that is that this week in our particular pastoral charge, we did lose someone, Gladys Penny. We had her funeral on Friday. With her family, a large family, and Jack brought the homily and I officiated. And so let's be remembering them in prayer. And Gladys was 95 years of age in her passing, and it hasn't been easy for the family, expected but not easy. So let's be remembering them. Now, so the offering this morning, the way that we're going to do this, because I know we have a number of congregations represented here, the offering that you have in your specific church envelope will go to your church. We're not going to open it and take out our share. Tempting as it may be, we're not going to do that. Now, you heard that, eh, gentlemen? Disregard what I just said. So, so anyway, but any open offering we're going to give to the MHI, Multi-Faith Housing Initiative. So all the cash that comes in will actually go to MHI. So if would you come forward, please, with the offering? And so we'll receive this at this time. Father, we thank you this day for the many blessings that we have, and we would ask that as we give back some of what you have entrusted to us, that you would use this for the furtherance of your kingdom and for your glory. For it's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So, now we're going to move into the next portion of our service here today. And I'm going to introduce our guest speakers. Suzanne Lee is the Executive Director of the Multi-Faith Housing Initiative, and she has 10 years of leadership experience with a number of Ottawa-based nonprofit charitable organizations. But she's very experienced in leading multicultural teams, which is a marvelous contribution to be able to make. So she's been developing and delivering social development projects, managing local organizations, and she's an inspirational and ethical leader and a champion for diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And so she is very passionate about social justice and with a strong belief that everything is possible. Whoa, there you go. And now Julie comes to us a known quantity, and she is with the Western Ottawa Community Resource Center, and she is their involved in rural community development. So she is totally devoted to developing programs and what have you in the rural community. Now, those of you, she spoke here a few weeks ago, but also just about a year ago, she came and presented to our board about their desire to move community services out into deeper into West Carleton. So we have here a hub that will begin on the 15th of November, which is nice to have that date, Julie. Thank you very much. And so community services out of Baldwin Hall, as well as out of the seniors complex in Constance Bay, so that many of the services that people enjoy in urban Ottawa are now going to be available out here. So this is wonderful. But one thing I did come to realize, and that is that Julie is also part of spearheading a discussion amongst organizations and faith groups about housing issues. And it's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the need. And so I hope you address that too, Julie. Feel free. Because all of these things work together. And so I'm not stealing any of your thunder today, ladies. So I'm going to invite you to come now. And they're going to, either you can sit or stand. We're trying to make this as easy as possible. And so they're kind of going to be tag teaming. Isn't this great? We have our kids' corner over here, right? And so they're going to go back and forth with their presentation. So, and as you can see, Steve Meyer is here, and so we're taping this. And so I'm going to ask you to speak into the mic because that's
okay.
All right. So we will leave that to you, ladies. Over to you.
Thank you. Okay, I got this.
So that's the last slide that I see up there.
Okay.
That's the last slide?
Yes.
Anything is possible. Hold on. Oh, I had this trouble last time. Okay, hold on. Here we
you
go.
gotta point
Don't read it. Oh, wow. If only I had known that last time we were here. Okay. All right. Under the table. All right. Thank you, everybody, for having us back. I feel weird sitting, but we'll do this. Again, I always feel like I'm so much at home, and there's so many people here that I recognize. So thank you so much for having us come out and talk about this. And before we launch into this, the reason that Steve put me on the spot there and said don't hold back and talk about the iceberg is because housing really is just one of the issues. And if we have housing issues, we have issues related to poverty that are way, way deeper. And I think I would do everybody a disservice if I did not talk about our food bank. And I did not talk about our work on rural housing. And I didn't talk about your neighbors who are struggling. So I will talk about that, and I'm hoping that speaks to something in you that helps to further some engagement on housing. So that's just my preamble. I'll put it over to Suzanne to start the official presentation.
So, like Julie said, thank you very much for having us here today. It's very pleasurable for me to be in a church, in a faith setting, because that is a lot of what drives the work that I do. I come to you, I am a Christian, and it doesn't matter what. I know a lot of people argue that Christ said this and Christ said that, and no matter what your kind of political conservative spectrum that you sit on, there's one thing that no Christian can argue about, and that is that Christ talked a lot about poverty and the poor and our responsibility to take care of them. So that is where I come to you today. And so we can start with the official presentation. So multi-faith housing came out of that position. We were born in the Archdiocese Center in 2000, a Catholic working group for the poor, and they were looking at the issues that affected the poor, and they looked at food banks, and they looked at the need for clothing and health and nutrition and all those different areas that affect the poor in so many different ways. And what it all came down to was one thing, and that was housing. That if they could afford their housing, they wouldn't be in this position. They wouldn't be so poor. They would be able to afford their food. And a good example of that is when I very first started at Multi-Faith Housing Initiative. I went out for lunch with my minister, Dr. John Montgomery, who actually was the minister out in Smith Falls or Perth for like 19 years. So he comes from that setting. And we had lunch, and he was quite depressed that day, and he was very down. And I said, what's wrong? You've had a hard morning, John? And he said, yes. A woman had come in to see him, like I'm sure your church, we have these little gift certificates, these little, that you can hand out, these little chits for groceries and food. And she had come in search of one of those. He said she was maybe 30 and she looked to be 50. She had 3 children, and she had lost custody of them for a while when she had run into issues around drugs and alcohol. She had gotten herself straightened out. She had regained custody of her children. And she was living on about a little under $1,200 a month. And her rent was $950 a month. So she has 3 children, and she has about $200 a month for food, clothing, transportation, and anything else that might come up needs for those kids. She was lucky. The kids had a breakfast program at the school, so they at least had a little bit of food that she could count on them having every day. But other than that, she counted on food banks. But food banks, you're only allowed to go once every couple of weeks. You're only allowed to take so much food, and it just wasn't enough. And she was in dire straits. So I said, John, you need to tell her about Multi-Faith Housing Initiative. We need to do something about her housing because she can't afford it. And he went, Multi-Faith Housing Initiative, what are you doing there? And so then I told him, and now I'm going to tell you. But first, Julie.
Oh, did you go through that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they can read it.
Okay. So our mission at Western Ottawa, big caveat, I am representing an organization that is not in any way an expert on housing. So what we do at Western Ottawa, what we have done out here with your communities, is partner with others to ensure accessible services for everybody. We are working potentially with multi-faith housing, but with a number of other agencies and organizations to start to talk about how do we do rural housing. One of the things that drives my work and drives a lot of my colleagues' work, and Maria Fries, who is the actual head of this project at Western Ottawa, who couldn't be here today, is this idea that from a health equity lens, meaning from a lens of fairness, it's not exactly on par right now that rural Ottawans do not get any services. Housing is just one example of that. There is no housing out here. We have housing, I think 7 units. I'm looking for Eli. Yeah, okay. There's 7 units, I think, in CARP that are affordable housing. And we're going to talk a little bit about what affordable housing and what housing that is affordable means, so that we can all get to consensus. But essentially, we are not experts. We are working with organizations that are.
All right, and that's basically what Multi-Faith Housing Initiative does. As I said, we were born in 2000 in the Catholics, in the Catholic Working Group for the Poor. The bishop at the time came to, the Archbishop came to the group and said, this isn't just a Catholic problem, it's an everybody problem. This should be an ecumenical issue. Reach out to the other Christian communities and form a coalition and start working together, and that's what Multi-Faith Housing Initiative did. And then in 2001, a couple of planes flew into a couple of buildings in New York City, and there was a lot of fear, and there was a lot of concern, and there was strife. A rip had been torn into the fabric of society, and the Multi-Faith Housing Initiative saw an opportunity there. And that's why whenever I present the organization, I do present it as dualistic. We are a group that works together in a collaboration of peace and harmony, showing how faith can actually contribute to the world and be part of who we are and what society is, and what we do is housing. So we have 71 units. We have, right now, we have over, actually I have 70 there, but we reached 75 the other day, so we're over 75 faith groups. Christians, all of the Christians, we have the Muslims, Shia and Sunni are both members. We have Baha'i, we have Hindu and Sikh, we have Unitarians, and we have all of the different Judaism, different congregations are members of us. So we really are, we have a structure that looks very much like something that church people would be familiar with. Any church person can walk out of a United Church or and walk into Multi-Faith Housing and feel very at home, because we have 9 working committees. and that's where all the people from the different faiths, volunteers, come in and get involved. Currently, we have 26 units on Blake. We have 5 units on Kent Street and 10 units in a little building. Well, it's a big condo building called Somerset Gardens that was a church, had a St. John's Anglican Church on Elgin Street, had a parking lot. They wanted to redevelop it, but they also wanted to realize their mission. So in looking at how they could work that church's need to have some financial income to sustain them for the long term, together with their mission, they were able to work it out that they sold the land for a little bit less than they would have to the highest paying person, and in exchange, the developer who bought it had some units that he sold to Multi-Faith Housing Initiative at low market, so that we could then turn around and offer it at low rents. We also are in development on 98 units in Barrhaven. That's a family community for homeless families. I can talk a little bit more about that later.
So,
what? Turn your slide.
oh, thank you. Okay. I'm not supposed to touch the mic. Okay, it's hard. I want to touch the mic. So, hearing from seniors in West Carleton, I also want to say that this is, let me start with that. The consultation that Western Ottawa did in West Carleton this last year, we finished up in about May or June, and as Steve referenced, we're opening our hub in a month from now, a month-ish from now. One of the, I guess the objectives of that consultation was to hear about all of the priorities that were bubbling up in West Carleton. Now, the ones that we dealt with right off the bat, opening the hub and getting services out here, that's underway. So that's good. So we can start to look at some of the other priorities that really came up. Housing was one of them. There were a number of other ones, but housing was one of them. And not housing in the way that you would think. Not housing in the sense that people were saying we need affordable housing. That didn't come up because the language is always different. We also heard from people who said we're not caregivers. But a lot of you are caregivers, right? So the language was very different. What we were able to grasp from that consultation was that people in their homes, particularly seniors, are having trouble staying in their homes because, first of all, they want to stay in the community and can't find a place to move to. That's one issue. Another issue is their houses are falling apart, some a little, some a lot. And we've been supporting the men's ministry to help us out with that. But at the end of the day, if that's sort of one of the biggest challenges that is across West Carleton, the men's ministry will also have a challenge dealing with that, with helping every single person that comes forward with a need. We also found that for those who were looking for something that was affordable, it's just not here. It's just not here, and people must leave and access services in other parts of Canada or downtown. Now, that wasn't enough for me because that's just one population group that we talked to. So what I did was connected with the rest of my teams back in the city in Canada to find out what is everybody saying. What's the big problem? And everybody said, yeah, housing is a really big challenge for rural, for suburban, for urban. So I can't really break it down for you that it's just rural. Housing is an issue for everybody, but it is the tip of the iceberg. If people cannot afford to have a home, they cannot afford to eat. They cannot afford hydro. You guys all have Hydro One out here, and every single one of you has probably been shocked once or twice by your hydro bill. So if you can imagine, if you're sitting on a fixed income and you've got 6 kids and you're sitting in Constance Bay, what a shock your hydro bill is going to be. And if you have to choose between feeding your children and paying the bill to heat your home, you're probably going to do that. Our food bank, I just wrote the minutes for our last meeting. I owe other people minutes. I apologize, it's coming from our task force meeting. But I did write the food bank minutes, and we're up, I think, almost 70 calls this year. So your community is full of people who are in need. Housing is one part of that, but poverty levels are here. There are hidden needs here that people aren't sharing for lots of reasons. And we often hear the myth around, rural communities really help themselves. Everybody bands together and works together. And if you need something, you're going to get it. And I want to challenge that a little bit because I'm sure that there's also pride and a reluctance to ask for help, even though you've done it before. I kind of want to paint the picture for you that housing is definitely a need, that we need to engage around that we need to make sure that we can make some advocacy move around that. Working with the Anglican Church as well, they've got a pledge to do 125 units of affordable housing, and they're committed to looking at what does a rural housing strategy look like, because guaranteed, it's not a housing unit that we have in CARP. It's got to be something different than that. And it's got to address needs for all types of families and all types of communities.
All right.
Probably stole.
Oh, no, that's right.
Switch. All right.
So first, I'm going to give you a quick look of a snapshot of what this list looks like in the city. And the list is what we call the centralized registry. People go on this list when they are in core housing need. And they are running at risk. They recognize the writings on the wall. They're going to lose their housing. They can't stay where they are. There, as Julie just said to you, and I'll talk to you a bit more about that further on, there is no real housing available in the city. So deep core need is someone who's rent geared to income. It's no more than 30% of someone's income on their shelter costs. Anyone who's paying more than 30% is what we call at risk. Anyone who's paying more than 50% is what we call housing failure waiting to happen. The writings on the wall, we know they're going to go into failure. They cannot sustain. So the list in Ottawa is over 10,000 households. Anyone who lives within the Ottawa boundaries, that includes rural Ottawa, when you're in need, you go on this list. You can ask for certain areas, but you have to go where you're offered a place. Of that, I also want to talk about 40% of the families that are single parent, and single parent households that are on that list, 40% of that list is single parent households. We have shelters in Ottawa. We have 1,000 beds for singles, men and women. We also have family shelters. The total being 1,300. Last year, over 1,500 children lived in shelters in Ottawa. And they spent an average, so in 2012, it was 88 nights, an average time that they were in that shelters before they got a housing offer. In 2013, that went up to 98 nights. In 2014, it went up to 105 nights. And in 2016, we saw it dip down again a little bit to 98 nights. Family housing is a very hard issue to tackle and is very much in need. CHIO estimates that 50% of the children that they see coming through their front door are in housing need, and that housing need is causing health problems. So the housing needs sprinkles over to poverty, to poor nutrition, to not being dressed appropriately for our weather, and we have weather. So it becomes a ripple effect. I'll just go to the next slide. The need in rural Ottawa. 1969, this is from a study we call the neighborhood study, and of that, so we have in rural Ottawa, rural west, northwest Ottawa, so this area, 1969 people are living in poverty, below what we call the low income cutoff. Americans call it the poverty line. At-risk households, 2025, those are people who are households paying over 30% of their income for their shelter costs. Go to the next slide. So here's your statistics broken down a little bit more. Cumberland, you've got, this is rural Ottawa on the east side, 1,481 households that are looking for affordable housing. What you see in the brackets there, A equals how many affordable houses are available in that community. It's considered affordable if it's 30% below average rent. So 70% of average market rent. Then you have your deep core need units, which are those rent geared to income, and those will be a lesser number than that, although you can't get much lesser than 0. Goldburn is at 0, but you have 285 households who are on the registry. Osgood Township, 599 households. Rideau Township, 130. West Carleton Township, 71. When we talk about poverty levels, actually right here, Fitzroy Harbour had almost 27% of the households in Fitzroy Harbour are living in poverty and paying more than 30% of their rent, their income for shelter costs. Go to the next slide. Oops. So, meeting the need. In order to develop affordable housing, you need two things. You need land and you need money. The first thing you need, most importantly, is land. In my business, we say land equals project, no land equals no project. If we have land that is zoned appropriately, we can compete. In the Ottawa every year releases what we call the Action Ottawa RFP, which is an Action Ottawa request for proposals. The federals download to the province downloads to the city, everybody puts a little bit in the pot, they have a few $1 million, and then they say, all right, housing associations and housing organizations, bid, what have you got, what kind of project can you put together for this? And then we put together a project. If you have the land, you have a good project. If you don't have a land, you're not likely to win that RFP. The land helps you get the money, is the second half of that, because you can win those RFPs. You also, Multi-Faith Housing Initiative is a registered charity. So we do better than what that money allows us to do. Take a look and see. Yeah, I talk about Barrhaven. I'll show you the Barrhaven example in a minute so you can see that. Go on that.
So the other two very important things that we need are reducing stigma. We need to work together to reduce that stigma. I think Suzanne just said it. Our community is full of people with needs. So it's people that you see every day. So reducing that stigma around what poverty looks like, and supporting it anyway, supporting the housing anyway. And then there's also we should be striving to work together. What's really neat about a concept called collective impact is that working with faith groups, I've found, has been incredibly beneficial for not only what we can do together, not only the volunteers that kind of come to you with faith communities, but with the potential to look at multiple sides of a coin, and then other agencies become very intrigued by the work you're doing. Governments like it. Funders really like it. So once you've sort of collected all your people from the various sectors, sometimes business comes along, and you can accomplish a lot more when you're not just looking at the usual suspects. So if we can out here, if we are serious about pushing the envelope to advocate for some rural housing, pulling in faith, pulling in our government reps, pulling in our counselors and business, we have a thriving business park 20 minutes from here. So there's no reason that a collective impact approach to getting housing done can't happen. Starts here, starts with the lack of, we don't want this in our backyard, and rather having the perception that this is a good thing to have in our backyard because it supports more people in need. And in the end, it probably makes for a better community. So there you go.
We actually believe very strongly that it makes for a better community when you include everybody, and that idea that everybody has a right to housing and a right to raise their children or to grow old in a safe community that they can afford, that they're not at risk and worrying from day to day if they're going to have a place to sleep and what's going to happen to them tomorrow. So just to show you what can be done, what we're doing right now. We are building in Barrhaven, 98 homes. This is for homeless families. There is also some one-bedroom units there that would be available for seniors. It is 100% visitable. That means that anybody in a wheelchair or with any kind of accessibility issues can visit every single one of their neighbors. We believe in community. It's part of who we are. We are building this as a result of the Action Ottawa RFP. The city put up land this time. They don't often put up land, mostly they don't, but they put up land this time. We put in a request for proposals, we put in our own bid, and we won, and we were the underdog, and there was a couple of reasons why we won this RFP. One, we're a charity. We're able to fundraise. We committed to fundraising an additional $1.5 million on top of what the government was putting into this pot so that we could offer more subsidies and deeper subsidies so that we could really meet the core need of families. Second one was the multi-faith component of who we are. I have a vision for this community, and that is something that really speaks to the organization. I really do believe, and this comes from an educated background, that we have put in political correctness in a wrong way. That is that idea that we pretend we're all the same and don't talk about those things that make us different is the wrong way to do it. You want a real rich culture, a real history, a real rich society, a real rich part of what Canada is and what I think Ottawa is. We recognize those differences, we celebrate them, we learn about them, we know about our neighbors and what makes them different. So we have reached out to our faith group members in this community, and we have asked them to lead services around their different events. So Sukkot is coming up next week for Jews, and a couple of weeks ago they had Rosh Hashanah, their New Year. Then there's Eids and Ramadan, and there's Christmas and Easter, not holidays, Christmas and Easter. And we are talking about having those faith groups out. We've built a big community room and a big community circle, and we're asking them to lead services around the holiday for which all of the neighbors and all of the community are invited to come out and participate and learn about each other. So you will have your Muslims neighbors coming and celebrating Rosh Hashanah with the Jewish neighbors. We have people who are going to be living in this community who are coming from places where being a little different isn't just a little uncomfortable or annoying. It could actually be life-threatening. And we have to make them live together, and we have to make them grow together. And I don't want to just make them comfortable, I want to make them thrive. Another important part of this community is that environmentalists, be proud, it is LEED registered, it's going to be certified LEED Gold. Important, not only have we paid attention to our environmental responsibility here, but on top of that, it lowers the operating costs of the units. So it lowers those electricity bills that the tenants will have to pay. We've paid attention to all that, although we pay the water bills, but it lowers the water bills. And so we've really built that in. And then the last thing is we've included community gardens, and not just regular community gardens. We're having some that are flat community gardens, and we're having some elevated so that people with accessibility issues in wheelchairs will be able to garden. That kind of helps to address the food security thing, but it also gets them out, gets them active. People like to garden, people like to grow their own food. That is what we can do with a piece of land. That's what we can do because we're a registered charity. The next thing that we're doing is right now we are in the pre-development phase of Veterans House, what we're calling Veterans House. And we actually have the vision of having a whole bunch of these Veterans Houses, but this is the first one. It's a house for homeless veterans. I think that most of you will be shocked to know that on average, 85 of our homeless people living on the streets every night are veterans. So they come back from war theater, they are in bad shape, they are suffering from PTSD, they are self-medicating, and they are on the streets. And it's not just the veterans who will be helping with this house, they'll be their families. I have to tell you, a couple weeks ago, one of our project partners here, Soldiers Helping Soldiers, they put on their uniforms, they're serving the military, they put on their uniforms, they go into the shelters, and they serve meals so that they can identify. In the last couple of years, they've identified over 380 veterans. But recently, they found this veteran who was sleeping in a tent behind the War Museum. And realized after talking to him that he came from Newfoundland. Well, one of the people in Soldiers Helping Soldiers, Captain Vicky Ryan, also came from Newfoundland, and apparently Newfoundland is a very small little town of a province. And so she reached back and called her auntie, who started making phone calls, and next thing you know, they had found this fellow's mother. Well, she flew in to find her son on the streets. And the day that she was going out searching for him with the team from Soldiers Helping Soldiers, she came into my office to talk to me about this project and to tell me what this project would mean to her. And she sat there wringing her hands and telling me that she hadn't seen her son or known if he was alive or dead for the last 3 years since he came back from Afghanistan. And if she had a house like this, that she knew he was there, and she knew he was safe, and she knew he was getting the support he needed, what this would mean to her. So we are very committed to this project, and we plan on having our shovels in the ground in 2017.
Where is that?
This one will be built on the former Rockcliffe Air Base. And then after that, we're going to start doing some evaluation of different communities in the country because Multi-Faith Housing Initiative is federally registered. We will be then looking at where the next one needs to go as soon as we're done the first one, because the need in Canada is deep, and I believe we owe these soldiers a duty of care. As a country, we owe them a duty of care, and we have not done the best job at fulfilling that duty of care. United Church Presbytery Actions. Dave Sherwin can speak to this, but in May 2016, Ottawa Presbytery passed a motion to support our campaign for the Haven. As I said, of that community in Barrhaven, we call it the Haven. We call it the Haven for a reason. That name came to me when I was talking to refugee family after refugee family. They came as refugees. They were now successful business people. And they said when they came to Canada, it was such a haven. And I thought, well, the Haven in Barrhaven, it's also a play on the name Barrhaven, conveniently, but the Haven in Barrhaven, we're going to have refugees, we're going to have people who just ordinary Canadians seeking shelter from poverty, but that it would be this safe place for them to be, and it just seemed to be a very good fit. And I think that all faiths believe in that idea of a haven. So Presbytery passed a motion to support our campaign and collectively fundraise $100,000 between all the churches who are with part of the Ottawa Presbytery. As I said, this project is for homeless families and other homeless individuals, but mostly families, and it will be offering a lot of units at deep core need, and then the balance at below market rent, so the working poor. So membership, we have over 100 units. I'm going to move this ahead and see where I am. So we have over 75 members right now, and membership is $100. 16 of the United Churches in the Ottawa Presbytery are members. We're looking at really increasing that, I think more than doubling that, and we're well on our way. We ask people to become members. We ask faith groups to become members. It gives you voting rights at our AGM. You'll get updates on what's going on. But most importantly, you have buy-in to the work we're doing. We are your hands and feet in housing. We ask you to not watch us do it, though. We really do ask you to engage with us and work with us. I did mention 9 working committees, I think, at an earlier point. And so we're asking people to come in, to become members, to support us, attend. We have an interfaith prayer service coming up on November 13th to recognize National Housing Day. We have a tulipathon, walkathon in May. Actually, I think I have some pictures of that. I want to kind of go ahead. We'll go ahead. So the tulipathon, actually, go ahead there, and that's National Housing there. So the tulipathon, this one is fun because I ask all of our faith group members to send out a team to this walkathon and to carry a banner. And last year we even had a banner contest and the mayor judged it. But the point of the banner is I want to dispel those myths, the other side of who MHI is, that myth that faith is something that should be done away with in society, that it's dangerous, that it causes war, that it's bad, and somehow, that John Lennon song, imagine if there was no religion. Well, I think that that's not a world I want to imagine. And so I want everybody to see, and we want everyone to see, that faiths work together and we contribute and serve the community. And we're valuable and you want us here. And so we ask all of our faith group members to show up with a banner. And so that's kind of a picture of some of the faith groups holding their banners, and they'll say things like, A Good If Israel supports multi-faith housing, and, St. John's believes in affordable housing in Ottawa. And it's all walking together and we're all in solidarity. And I think it's a very good picture of who we are as a community. And so this is the core of who we are, that we can do this together, that we are all in this together, that we are all called to serve the community, and what we do. Multi-Faith Housing Initiative is faith in action. So thank you very much, and that's the end of my talking. Julie, if you wanted to add anything.
Did a great job.
I don't know about you, but when I heard 9 working committees, my heart started to go. As you can see, these ladies are to be commended, as well as their organizations. Eli, welcome. Good to see you. And as we think about faith communities, that's who we are here today in West Carleton. And we have people, as you saw the statistics, we have people around us that are living beyond their means. They really cannot afford where they are, 30%, and then those who are on the verge of actually being in crisis. We're talking in the hundreds. This is a reality in our midst, and unfortunately, when people finally get to the place where they have to actually vacate where they're living, they have to leave the community. They have to go search for this in the urban setting, which is really unfortunate. What we were hoping here today, as Hillary and Heather and I were discussing this, what we're hoping is that we could raise consciousness today about this issue that is a real life issue for people that you know, and perhaps you don't quite appreciate the situation because you don't have enough information. But we wanted to begin the conversation here that we very well could see a multi-faith housing initiative be involved in a project of some form. As you heard Suzanne say, the key, and she mentioned and underscored that the key is what? Land. If we had some land, and it was land in an area that that would be the best possible setting for something of this nature, where something could be built. We're talking, years down the road, I realize, but it begins here. It begins with people like yourselves saying, well, I hadn't really thought of that before. But there are people that really need to hear from us.
Can I interrupt?
Certainly.
I think creativity, too,
right?
Go
And,
ahead.
and so, so Suzanne and I have talked about this. The challenge with building, there's challenges with building in rural, and I think those are realistic challenges. And with the support of our government officials, that can be mediated. But I think there is some call for creativity too around what does that look like for people who live here. And so it might not be the bricks and mortar haven that you see in Barrhaven, and it might not be the veterans housing, but it does instill in us and inspire us to be a little bit creative about what it might look like.
So I wanted to open this up for just a few moments for questions for our guests today. And if you have any questions, then please, this would be the time to ask one. Yes.
So you're looking for land. How much land does a project take in order to get houses here?
So the question is, how much land does a project take to get a project here?
So, for example, the Haven is 3.44 acres, and that's 98 homes. The Haven is on a little over, Veterans House is on a little over 1 acre, and that's 40 bachelor units, so for single people. That building has a lot of community space, so that things that we know about soldiers is that they fight in units, they'll heal in units. So we've really built that in. There are things that you have to get around. So you have land, but a land in the middle of a farm field isn't great because we won't be allowed to build on it. It has to be zoned. I have spoken to my construction team at the Haven to see the possibility of how do you build a building, a bigger building, say a 40-unit family building or a 40-unit one-bedroom apartments, but an apartment building or townhouses in the country that hasn't got plumbing. They don't have regular city plumbing. And they explained to me how it was done, and it was very jargony and engineering-ish. But my takeaway was it absolutely can be done as long as it's zoned correctly. So the land dictates the project. The bigger the land, the more project you can build. But you have to start with the land.
Dwight.
Yes, regarding the land, most rural villages, including this one, has an area that's described as within the village boundaries. And in this village, there's at least 100 acres that's within the village boundaries that's farmland right now. Okay? So that would be easier to proceed on than as you said, other lands. My question is to you, as you struggle to provide affordable housing, does the city give you any assistance in terms of waiving development charges or cutting back on permitting? Is there any?
Yes.
Are they working with you?
Yes, so that Action Ottawa RFP that I mentioned earlier, part of that is the waiving of development charges. So it was about $10 million in capital. Then so it's a $19.5 million project, not including land. And so we got $10 million from the 3 levels of government. We are inputting our own $1.5 million. That's the fundraising campaign. Then the remaining $8 million will be a loan with Infrastructure Ontario, a mortgage, 30-year mortgage that we'll pay using the rents that we get. But we also got the deferment, or the government, the city, paid our development charges for us, and that's about another $1 million. On the Veterans House project, we are not going into an Action Ottawa RFP for that, because when you use an Action Ottawa RFP and you're successful, you are tied to that waiting list. Well, being a veteran is not a priority on that waiting list. So in order to ensure that Veterans House is for veterans and veterans alone, we cannot touch the city money. That said, I have still informed the city that I expect them to pay all the development charges.
Now, Eli, you're taking notes, right? Okay, great. So did that answer your question, Dwight?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
So there would be available land right here.
Fantastic.
That's great. Yes, Rick.
With regards to building the haven, if you will, for the military, the ex-military
Is there any part in what?
Are there any monies available from the armed forces?
No. So we have, privately, yes, the armed forces are donating and people who are supportive of the troops. We have a single donor in Toronto who has committed $500,000 to that project. It's an $8 million project. That said, we are applying for a CMHC fund has just opened its door, and we had made a commitment to get that project shovel ready with the idea that we would have it sitting there on a silver platter, that if a door opened, we would be ready to run through it. And it seems that the door has opened, and so we have just submitted an application for a new fund that is a one-time, one-shot deal with CMHC called the Innovation Fund. We've applied for a few $1 million from them. We will have to still fundraise several $1 million for that project. But VAC themselves, Veterans Affairs Canada, and DND will not, out of their own budget, be contributing to the capital project. VAC will offer supports in kind. So it's supportive housing. You can't take somebody off the streets and just put them in housing. It's the first stop, it's the first spot, but you have to give them supports, especially when you're dealing with that population. You have to recognize they're coming in with PTSD issues. They're coming in with drugs and alcohol issues as a result of the PTSD. They've been self-medicating. They're coming in with anger management issues. And so we have support services that will be in that building, and VAC will be offering caseworker support for them, and then we have Ottawa Salis who will come in with all the other supports, and then we have Soldiers Helping Soldiers who will come in and do peer mentoring, and we even have the PTSD support dog unit who will be coming in and working with the tenants for whoever qualifies for dogs, and training them and training the dogs. And we've actually had a charrette a couple weeks ago, and we have redesigned our landscaping in order to make sure that we meet the needs of the tenants who will have dogs.
I would add to that, just a caveat, and that is that if that project goes across the nation, then I would suspect that you would find DND, the CAF weighing in. I think a case could be made there.
Oh, they like to weigh in. I just want them to give some money, too.
No, but that's what I meant. That's what I meant. Because it's a new initiative, and it just takes time for that to be seated properly, and I think that could be done. Any other questions before we close? Yes.
I was just wondering for the Haven, obviously the developers are building it, but is there any need for volunteers to come in, like painting and stuff like that?
We will have volunteers coming in for to do some gardening, initially getting all those gardens up and running, the community gardens. You know how you have spring and fall cleanup days? We expect to have kind of big, wide calls to our membership to come in for those fall and spring cleanup days to work, and we'll actually ask the tenants to also participate, so everyone's kind of working together. And then, other than that, while it's under construction, it is legally a construction site, so we can't have volunteers kind of go in and start painting, which is normally our normal unit turnover. We have what we call one of our property management team, one of our committees, and they go in whenever one of our units is vacated. They go in and they fix the little things that need to be fixed, and they paint it and get it ready for the next tenant. That's part of the regular turnover process. But on the Haven, because it's a construction site, it's very restricted who's allowed to walk onto the site past the fences until they hand me the keys, and when they hand the keys, they're going to be all painted. So. But
you do see that initiative of this nature in rural Ottawa is something that is doable.
Absolutely. It's absolutely very doable. It starts with land. Once we have the land, then we have a project that we can plan for. We can start looking at the land, the shape of the land, the zoning of the land, imagining what it is that we could do there. That's where all this creative process comes in. That's when we would start having charrettes, which are kind of like brainstorming events with the community. What do we want to do? What do we want to see in there? Do we want to build a hub into do a ground floor with a hub and a community room, and then have units above that? How do we imagine this, and how will it best serve the community? Then you start to put together a project. Once you start to put together a project, then you're looking for the money. That's part two, is the money.
But Suzanne, I mean, this could be another committee. Hillary.
So I just had a question in terms of thinking creatively as well.
Nice and loud.
Oh, yes. Do you ever, and maybe you haven't as yet, I know you're talking about building, constructing units, but in terms of rural areas where there are existing, like, homes that may have been abandoned or on the verge of being abandoned or whatever, people might donate, where you can actually then renovate or, in terms of building units.
That's right. So that's certainly an option, and it's more of an option in rural Ottawa than it is in urban Ottawa, because urban Ottawa, those properties, even abandoned and derelict, seem to be very expensive. But the one thing that you would have to look at is the cost of retrofitting versus the cost of building it. And sometimes that cost of fixing it, making sure it's environmentally clean, making sure that it meets the needs. So if you need elevators or accessibility and you start knocking down walls and those walls are supporting walls, and all of a sudden you're getting, and then also making sure that it's sound, that it's not going to cost people a fortune in electricity bills to maintain, that they're cold and uncomfortable. There were some cases of that in Ottawa. Someone donated to for a project on Crichton Street in New Edinburgh, a very expensive area, a big building. And they put several $100,000 into it before then they realized that it could go no further, and the building was condemned and they had to knock it down and start from scratch. And so you have to look at the building, and it could be the right way to go, and it could not be the right way to go. It would depend on the need in the building.
Dave, did you have a question?
Well, it's pretty well the same thing that Hillary was asking. I was questioning one question about the number of schools that have been shut down. If you're looking at the property, but then again, of course, the buildings would probably have to be torn down, I would think, to start over again because of the building codes and the requirements. But as far as land, I know the 3 schools that closed around here, they didn't pay very much for them, as far as, and they're fairly big pieces of property, at least the one in Walton and the one in Kinburn, the one over here, sort of a pie-shaped thing. So there's land.
That's step one.
Alan?
Recently, I heard the news that the city is considering coach houses and granny flats. Do you see a possibility of that in a rural area? Because often rural lots have space for a granny flat, but how would that fit into, or could it fit into affordable housing?
So for the granny flats, the rules around it is it would be owned by, and part of it can't be separate from the house that sits on the land. So it wouldn't be something, it would be something that individuals could do if they wanted to help create affordable housing, would be on their own, because it stays part of their property. And the issue that I would see in rural is it also has to be able to tap into your septic systems, and so you'd have to make sure that the engineering would work for that. That said, it's going to be legal. You can do them, absolutely, you can do them. But they have to, but the rules are, it's only allowed to take up a certain amount, it has to, of the land, it has to sit separately on the land, it has to tap into your existing electricity and plumbing and everything systems, and it has to, it cannot be at any point in time ever severed from the original property.
Eli?
Just like to add to what Suzanne was saying, but also we have in the rural area the second club, which is allowed almost the same as the coach house. Now the coach house, the province can encourage the municipality to adopt that policy. And it's not just for rural, actually, it's more for urban, the coach house, than it is for rural. But we try, government, I guess, trying to keep parents or grandparents living with their kids and grandkids housing and it's sold to a private ownership, and now they're building up instead of building down. And that's going to create perhaps hundreds of extra units versus just have those single units. And you're aware of those steps been taken by the social housing?
Yeah, absolutely. Our sector in Ottawa is very tight knit. So Stéphane Guy is the CEO of Ottawa Housing, and I've spoken quite a bit to him about the development that they're doing. It creates, in the end, it's going to be a net win when addressing the needs of that registry, that waiting list. In the interim, it's going to be actually put pressure on the housing, because what happens is they have to remove, and those communities are quite large, so several hundred units all of a sudden get taken out of the housing stock while it's being redeveloped, and that takes a few years. So you'll have a loss of affordable housing in the city while the redevelopment is taking place. Once it's done, it will be good. It'll definitely be very good. But in the meantime, it's quite hard. Multi-Faith Housing Initiative has a different approach to housing, and that is, we wouldn't want to see a community that is that large of affordable housing all at once, because it can become ghettoized. So we like to keep our 98, I think we'd never go bigger than 100 units in any one spot, because you just really want to make sure that you blend in, that it's not a ghetto, that it's someplace that people can feel proud to live and come home to, and not be living in that community. Our community at the Haven has been designed by Barry Hoban, who is the leading architect in the city of Ottawa. And I have to tell you, when I look at our buildings, they look nicer than the Campanelli ones that are around us. So
Okay, I'm going to close it off there. You can tell that Suzanne and Julie have an awful lot of information right at their fingertips. So if you have any other questions, we're going to be out here in Baldwin Hall for a time of fellowship. We're going to close by singing hymn number, well, it's not hymn number, it's up on the screen, Let Us Build a House, and then I'm going to ask Reverend Sherman if he would close off with our blessing and sending forth. You can go back to your seats now. Thank you. It will. Awesome. Let us build a house where love can dwell, all and safely live, a place where saints and children learn to forgive, filled of hopes and dreams and visions, rock of faith.
And now, my friends, go forth from this place with renewed inspiration for the work of God. Seek good, not evil, love goodness, and establish justice. This is the greatest offering that we can make, letting justice roll down like the waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Go in peace with love for our neighbors. God be our strength and guide to bear witness to your justice, love, and truth in our homes and community this week. Amen.
Eli just has one quick announcement. I think we need to hear it.
Thank you, Reverend. I'll make sure we'll make it quick. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., we're going to be gathered here, I think at 9:30, according to Ken. And we're going to be changing the name of the street from Carlton to our beloved former Reverend Jack Lougheed's Road. So, yes, so.
So who's the mayor?
So, the mayor, myself, and Ken Stewart, and the guests of honor will be here for a cake and a coffee, and we're going to unveil the name of the street tomorrow morning. So I hope you can join us. Thank you.
Okay, and on that note, thank you, and I would invite you all to come out into Baldwin Hall for some refreshment and conversation and fellowship. God bless.